Yes, so it sort of feels like slightly sweaty palms time, because I feel I'm going to be sort of talking about stuff that is really, really going to push your common sense buttons. And it's pushing mine. And I'm thinking about what I'm going to say and another part of me is going, yeah, but this is just complete nonsense. It's like, what common sense, isn't it? It's common sense. So, but it's when you start going into areas that sort of seem to defy what we normally understand as being self-evident, yeah, then it feels like there's a certain amount riding on that. But we'll see how we go. Anyway, so Vajrapriya kicked us off, talking about the skandhas. Well, first of all, he outlined the sort of basic issue, what causes us to suffer. What causes us to suffer. And what causes us to suffer is this sense of me, this being kind of somehow sort of a self-existent, self-sustaining, kind of complete and fixed in here, and everything else out there, which can either be a threat to this being or something that I can take to myself and sort of, make myself happy with. So we're constantly engaged in this kind of push me, pull you sort of thing with the world, wanting to have things that will make us happy and secure, and pushing things away that we think are a threat. And so that causes all manner of stress and sort of and problems, and the world's issues can largely be ascribed to people's tendency to do that. Me in here, everything else out there. So fixed, separate, selfhood. So Vajrapriya introduced the subject of the 5 skandhas, which are an early attempt, as it were, to kind of challenge that narrative, challenge that analysis. And in the manner of a minister who used to come to our church when I was a boy, he would always start his sermons by saying, "Can anyone remember what I talked about last time?" So I'm going to throw open to the floor, anyone, if you can remember what any of the 5 skandhas are. Aha! Okay, sorry? Form. Form being what? Yeah, but what is it? How did Vajrapriya describe form, describe rupa?
Body.
Yeah?
Body.
Body, okay, yeah. That's all part of it, yeah. So he used the term sort of corporeality, didn't he? That sort of sense of kind of, that experience of embodiment, of kind of like, I don't know, solidity of this kind of solid thing, or semi-solid thing, being here and being kind of real. Okay, that was the first one. Good. What came next? Vedana being? Feeling. In what sense?
The feeling.
Not the emotions.
Not emotions.
Just the feeling during the event.
Yeah, well, being sort of particularly. Right. So what we sometimes call hedonic tones. So that feeling that something is pleasant, like, I don't know, eating a biscuit, generally speaking, is pleasant unless you don't like biscuits, of course. Seeing somebody you like the look of is pleasant. Or having a brick dropped on your foot, unpleasant, kind of immediately, automatically, without any need to reflect on it. Yeah. So it's the pre-emotional stage of kind of response to things that happen in the world. Okay, and then following on from Vedana, we had... No, not yet. Perception, Sangha. So perception being...
Perceive your senses.
Yeah, well, it's what is the what? Yeah, it perceiving through the senses is what happens there when you perceive through the senses.
You recognise it.
Yeah, so you kind of order, you recognise things, don't you? So you kind of organise and order experience into something which then makes sense of the data you are receiving. So identifying, I don't know, yellow or blue or a chair or Vajrapriya, in this case based on past experience of Vajrapriya. Yeah, okay, so that's Sangha, that's the way that we make sense of our experience. And then you get volition, so Samskara or Sankara, depending which language you're using. And I know some people think we're a bit careless about which language we use. So the Pali would be Sankara, volitions, so our volitional responses to things, so our actions, which are kind of determined by will, if you like, so particular states of mind, so willed actions of various kinds. And the whole thing's topped off or rounded off with consciousness, with vijnana. Yeah, so consciousness, which we will go into a little bit more this evening, but broadly speaking, consciousness via the senses, including mind. So in Buddhism, mind being the sixth sense, as it were, so mind objects as objects of consciousness. And he said that vijnana had a particular quality which is sort of inherent in its name, if anyone can remember.
Divided.
Yes. So vijnana, the prefix vi means it divides into subject and object. So vijnana is that function of consciousness which divides everything we perceive into subject and object. In other words, perpetuating this sort of idea that there's me and everything else, if you like. Yes, so that was the 5 skandhas. As a useful sort of breakdown, as a way of attacking this idea of unified, fixed, self-existent entity. Okay? And I am not to be found in any of them. And I think we looked at this a bit last week. So in practice, you can't locate a sense of self in any of those modes of experience, because they're all subject to change. None of them are constant. Bodies are not constant, and all you have to do is look in a mirror or look at an old photograph to know that that's the case. Feelings, fleeting, come and go. Perceptions, come and go, and so on and so forth. Okay? So this evening I'm going to expand this a little bit. So when Vajrapriya was talking about the skandhas, it was kind of very much an analysis of the person, of me, of this kind of agglomeration of stuff that makes me up. So body, feelings, perceptions, volitions, and consciousness as a sort of personal attributes, if you like. But I'm going to introduce something a bit different that's going to expand this to basically include everything. Okay, so I'm going to talk about something which we refer to as the perceptual situation. Okay, and then I'm going to expand on that. I'm going to talk about the perceptual situation. So before you start getting worried this is going to be very technical, I don't think it is. So we're all in a perceptual situation right now. Okay, so perception is happening. So you are presumably perceiving things through the senses, including my voice, and I'm looking around and perceptions are happening. So there is sense input, there are things coming in through my senses. There is a situation in which perception takes place. Okay, now that perception has kind of like, as it were, that perceptual situation has two kind of elements to it. And this was coined by a well-known Buddhist scholar by the name of Herbert Gunther, and Bhante liked to quote this in various places. And Gunther talks about the objective and subjective poles of the perceptual situation. And you might be going, ooh, this all sounds a bit, not quite sure about that, but in a way it's quite straightforward. So in any perceptual situation, there seems to be something out there which is not part of me, which is not sort of mine, which is not part of the beholder, which I'm not in control of. Yeah. So there is some aspect of my experience which seems to be other, if you like, which I don't seem to be able to control. And Vajrapriya also said last week, didn't he, that all that we can know about anything, about out there, is the information that our senses give us. But in terms of from what our senses give us, there seems to be something out there which is not me, or does not appear to be me. Yeah. So you're listening to my voice, and you can't, by pure effort of will, turn my voice into the theme tune of the Archers. Yeah. Although you might want to. Right? Okay, so there is something about the experience which is out beyond your control, which is sort of objective, if you like. So again, there is resistance. So sitting on the floor here, there is something in my experience which is resisting the subject which seems to be out there being experienced. Okay, and that's the objective pole. So it's all the stuff which is apparently out there. Okay? And then there's the subjective pole, which is the experiencer. So in any perceptual situation, there's something that's being experienced, and there's apparently something which is experiencing it. Okay? And Gunther talks about the objective pole, so all the stuff which is out there, which is on the other end of the experience, as being rupa. So we talked about rupa last week as being corporeality, as being sort of the physical, as being stuff, and this expands that definition a little bit to being anything which is the object of our senses, right? Okay, so that is Gunther's definition of rupa. And in Buddhism there are 6 senses, and so including the mind sense. So I'm going to cautiously lump in mental objects into this category. So rupa is the object of our senses and mental objects. So ideas, thoughts, memories that our mind comes into contact with. I think all of those things are rupa. Okay? And what connects me in here, the experiencer, that I posit, that I think exists somewhere in here, with all of that stuff out there, is the senses. So the senses build the bridge, and that brings us to what I was going to introduce this evening, which is the somewhat sort of I don't know, is it frightening because there's a lot of them? The 18 dhatus, okay, or sense spheres. But you needn't panic, because that 18, that list easily gets broken down. Okay, basically what it is that for each sense you've got 3 things happening, 3 things going on. You have a sense organ, so the nose, the ears, eyes, the body as a sense organ, the tongue, taste buds, and the mind, right? And then you have the objects, or the perceived objects of those sense organs, and then there's the consciousness that connects the two. So there are 3 elements for each sense. Multiplied by 6, you get 18. Okay? So basically you can think of it, don't worry about it too much, just think of it in terms of the senses, their objects, and the experiencer of those objects, I guess. Okay? And for an experience, for a perception to happen, those 3 things all need to be in place. Okay? So you need to have a working sense organ. There needs to be something out there that sense organ perceives, and there needs to be a consciousness that connects the two. Now again, I think Vajrapriya he may have said this last time, that unlike our kind of modern idea of consciousness, which is a bit like a field that contains everything, Buddhism attributes consciousness to all the different organs. So you have eye consciousness, ear consciousness, tongue consciousness, nose consciousness, body consciousness, and mind consciousness. So each of those needs to be functioning for perception to happen. So obviously, if my eyes don't work, if I am blind, there can be no eye perception. And to put another example, so I might be asleep, right? My ears might be perfectly fine, and there might be sounds going on, but if I'm asleep, then what's missing is the ear consciousness that links the two. So again, in most, except if there's a very loud noise or a persistent noise that finds its way into my dream state, if I'm asleep, then that ear consciousness, that perception will not happen, doesn't take place. So it depends on those 3 things being present and correct and functional. And if you're anaesthetized, then clearly there is no body perception is possible. No, you can't feel anything with the body if you are deeply anaesthetized for an operation, and so forth. Yeah. So all of these things need to be happening for perception to take place. So perception connected with all 6 of the senses. Yeah. So that's the sort of technical bit out of the way. Those are the 18 dhatus. Yeah. The sense organ, the consciousness that goes with the sense organ, and something, some object of that sense. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to encourage you just to sort of sit for a couple of minutes and just experience the senses. You don't have to do anything with this. It's not an exercise. It's not something that you can get wrong. It's purely a matter of you might want to go into meditation posture or just relax. You might want to close your eyes. You want to keep them open because your sight is also a sense. So just sit still for a couple of minutes and just be aware of the senses in operation, including the mind sense. It's surprising how tangibly that changes the atmosphere. Yeah. Any reflections on doing that?
I have a question.
Yes.
I've often wondered about. It's probably. Well, I've got this feeling that it might be a silly question, but nevertheless.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take the sight sense.
Yeah.
and I might be walking somewhere and there are lots of sense objects there and my eye might be meeting them, but actually because I'm not consciously aware, oh there's a berry, for instance, does that mean perception's not taking place?
Well, what's your experience? Is perception taking place? If you're not aware of the berry?
I would think not, because there's a low level of consciousness, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be a good example. It's like, when we're walking along, I suppose there's only so much that we can engage with at any given time. So there will be things that, your eye might light upon, but you simply don't register because your consciousness is elsewhere. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think he was quite present. Everything I was very aware of. And it was all going, monks or sort of, hearing stuff, seeing stuff. And sort of, I only heard a couple of voices and then I imagined the people talking.
Yeah.
I imagined the bird. And every so often.
When you say you imagined, what do you mean?
I mean, it was the perception. It was a perception thing. It was pictures were forming.
Oh, okay.
So the connection was being made, rather than just sounds. So before doing that, I was listening to you, and there was stuff going on in the background that I either caught my attention or didn't, and then it was just like being aware, what I was seeing, what I was hearing. It was more present.
So Marcus was saying, I don't know if you can hear him, that he became sort of more present and started to kind of, as it were, as form images of what he was experiencing. So when you say images, do you mean like mental images or pictures of things? Okay, so you were kind of adding on to the experience, weren't you, by, in a sense, with concept? Yeah. 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 Good. Well, that is a common thing that we do, isn't it? We take everything and overlay it with concept, which is in a way what I wanted to come onto. Yeah. Our tendency to do that. So, common sense and concepts are really useful. Right? It's really useful to be able to stand in a bus lane and to be able to distinguish between a bus and a bicycle. Obviously, yeah, you need to be, common sense and sort of being able to kind of label and sort of categorise things as being in or out there is a useful thing to be able to do. But as Vajrapriya said last week, it has its limits in terms of our appreciation of reality. Okay, so I'm going to start with just a couple of little experiments. Okay, so let's look at this cloth here. Okay, so everyone look at this cloth, right? It's underneath my wonderful cushions. Can you see my cloth? Or look at some object in your room, in your space. You can see it, okay. So, has a particular colour, doesn't it? Yeah? So Jamie, would you mind turning the lights off?
Off?
Yeah. Okay, what happens?
It's darker.
Yeah.
There's different shadows on it.
There's different shadows on it. And Alan?
It gets darker.
Yeah. So the colour changes, the colour gets darker if you take the light away from it. Yeah. So what that means is we're already starting to sort of challenge the idea that there are things out there that have fixed qualities, objective qualities. Okay? And we can take that further by simply closing our eyes. So if you close your eyes, what colour is the cloth now? Anyone?
Mustard.
Are you saying that with your eyes closed?
Yeah, I could remember it was, I remembered it.
You remember it as being mustard, but that's an idea, isn't it? That's just a concept. Yeah, that is not an actual experience. Right? Okay? So as soon as you open your eyes again, There it is, back in its full mustardness. Yeah. So, what I'm trying to move towards here is a sort of getting away from this sense that of objects out there, separate from me, the perceiver, that somehow have like kind of inherent qualities that belong to them, which I have no influence over, which are not a question of the relationship between my senses and the thing. Okay, let's do something with touch. All right, I'm going to put the lights back on by all means. Oh, and it's a different colour. Look how much brighter it is. Let's grab a chair. Oh dear. Oops. Thanks. Put the chair where some people can see it, I suppose. Thank you. Bless you, please. Okay, so Carolyn, would you describe that chair for me? Describe its qualities.
It's blue, with grey, 4 grey legs, black rubber things at the bottom,
Yeah.
blue seat and blue board across the top, space in between.
Yeah.
Not to go on.
Any other qualities of it?
Any other qualities? It's interesting because that's when the concepts start to kick in. So I'm looking at the legs and I'm thinking they're hard,
Right.
but I don't know that.
Okay, come here and touch it. Okay, now what were its qualities?
Cold and hard.
Cold and hard, okay, all right. Take your hand away. Now, is it still cold and hard?
No.
Okay, so what's happened?
Well, I'm experiencing it through a different sense. So seeing the grey,
Yeah,
feeling, touching the cold and the hard.
yes. So what happens to that cold and hard quality when you're not touching it?
It's not, that perception isn't there, that sense isn't there anymore.
Yeah,
Well, I'm not using it.
yeah. So that's interesting, isn't it? Because we think of a chair as having grey legs that are cold and hard. But actually, until we touch it, that is just a concept. That is nothing other than an idea. But what we do is we take that idea and we attach it to that chair as if it was a kind of inherent quality of the chair. Do you get what I'm talking about? So we look at the world of objects like that. We think that object has particular qualities that belong to that object under all conditions. But as Carolyn has just so ably demonstrated, that particular qualities of the object depend on particular senses being engaged with it. Okay, so Carolyn, can you close your eyes and now describe your experience of the chair?
Well, I can't see it.
Ah, so what does that mean?
Well, that means I have to, well, if someone asks me to describe that chair, I have to use my, I have to use my thoughts, I have to use concepts, don't I? I have to use concepts, I have to use my memory.
Yes.
So I'm relying on a remembered experience.
Yeah, and you've opened your eyes and
And the remembered experience is pretty accurate.
right, good. But you've opened your eyes and there the chair is again.
Yes.
Okay? So the chair has suddenly mysteriously remanifested with your eyes open. Okay? So if we all close our eyes. And what is the experience of that chair now?
I get like an after image.
Sorry?
I get like an after image of the colour
You do? Okay. Is that still there?
fading.
Fading. Yeah, okay. So, with your eyes closed, right, everything that you assume is there that you would be looking at with your eyes open is just an idea. It's a concept. It's what is actually happening out there in terms of visual field is completely mysterious. Yeah, anything could have happened. But at which point your common sense is, of course, saying, yeah, but of course it's all still there, and of course it's all still the same colour, it's still green with grey legs, and it's still hard, and it's still cold to the touch. Yeah? And all of those things are sort of true in a kind of conventional sense, but they're not true in experience. Yeah? So you can open your eyes, by the way, now, if you haven't. Yeah? So what I'm trying to get at here is our tendency to kind of make things real and objective and separate them out into the experiencer, and the experience doesn't really stand up to scrutiny. Yeah, it's a useful model. It's a useful model for us, but when we actually get down to experience, what's actually happening is much, much more mysterious and open-ended and hard to pin down. So you can extend this idea, can't we? So imagine a universe in which there is no faculty of sight. Yeah? How would that be? What would happen to all of those visual objects, to the sort of qualities of things that we would see? Yeah? If there was no faculty of sight in the entire universe, then that just wouldn't exist, would it? It wouldn't manifest. So objects of that particular sense just wouldn't be able to manifest. Yeah? Yeah, the same thing would apply if we had no bodies. Let's say if we were purely incorporeal, yeah, then the whole kind of material, the matter, the fabric of the universe, to all intents and purposes, it wouldn't manifest. So imagine if, you can bring this a bit closer to home. So let's take the experience of a dog, right? So which is a dog's primary sense?
Smell.
Sense of smell. Okay, so imagine a dog's world, the sort of world of the kind of world of the senses that a dog inhabits. It's very different from the world of the senses that we inhabit because it's dominated by smell in the way that our world is dominated by, for most people, by sight. Yeah? So you can kind of imagine this sort of, what would it be like, sort of coloured sort of clouds or ribbons of sort of smell that would somehow be, the primary thing in the dog's experience. Yeah? It's just try and imagine yourself into a dog's world where that is the primary sense. And it would seem very different, wouldn't it?
You're using sight imagery there, aren't you?
I am using sight imagery because it's my primary sight, isn't it? My primary sense. That's right. Yeah. Okay. So let's take another example that's a little bit more alien to us, which is bat world. Right. So what's a bat's primary sense? It's like echolocation, isn't it? So a bat navigates through a form of sonar, through echolocation. So it sends high-pitched chirps out into the world and they come back. And that's how it knows. That's how it kind of navigates. That's how it perceives its world. Yeah? So imagine what it would be like. What it would be like to be a bat if that was your primary sense. You can't really, can you? Roughly speaking, of course, we and bats inhabit the same sort of physical universe with the same objects in it. A bat would still avoid a wall or in the same way that we would, even if it perceived it in very different ways. But it's as if that whole sense of kind of shared experience starts to really kind of attenuate, to really become much more kind of insubstantial, if you like. Yeah, but we do have some crossover of sense organs. Now imagine a being made of neutrinos. A being made of neutrinos. Do you know what a neutrino is?
Yes.
A neutrino is a subatomic particle that almost completely doesn't interact with the universe. Yeah, they get made in the sun, and they pass through everything. Yeah, they almost entirely do not interact with matter. Which means it's very hard to detect them, but they do occasionally land on a sensor. Yeah. So imagine if you were a being made of neutrinos and you simply didn't interact with our universe at all. Yeah. How would that be? Yeah.
Fun.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to sort of push the envelope of what we understand to be the common sense way of things, with objects out there with attributes and qualities. Well, what I'm trying to say is that it's all much more relative, depending on the kind of consciousness we have and the kind of sense apparatus we have, rather than it being the way we perceive things being the way things are. Yeah. In fact, in a way, all that our shared experience, you might quite rightly argue, but we all have a very similar experience. We all have a shared view or a consensus about what this room looks like and what Jayaratna looks like. I can't know that, or what this rupa looks like, or these flowers. But all that really tells us is that we have the same sort of sense organs and the same kind of sense consciousness. It says nothing whatsoever about the actual nature of reality. That just says something about how we are programmed to perceive it. Yeah, and so Buddhism was quite good. Early Buddhism was quite good about this. Buddhist cosmology is quite strong on this. So you have all of these different beings that inhabit different planes of existence. Yeah, the devas that live in the sort of world of archetypal form and the formless world that don't interact with our world at all. Yeah. And who's to say that there aren't such beings that just live on completely different planes of existence that don't experience the material universe in the way that we do? You know, how arrogant it would be to assume that just because we agree on the way the universe appears, that we are right, that we have the monopoly on how things actually are.
Well, what do you mean by a being in that case? Well,
they seem to be organised in some way with some, with intelligence and some kind of, some sort of existence, some kind of life, some kind of awareness.
Consciousness.
Precisely. Yeah. Yeah.
You need a physicist. See what they say.
Possibly, yeah.
I was just thinking that with somebody who's born blind, their concepts would be interesting to. I've never known a totally blind person very well. But it would be interesting to talk to them about their concepts formed from touch, because that's what they've really got sound as well.
That's right.
Their concepts of form will be completely different.
Well, the example of the person who's been blind from birth, I think, is a really interesting one too, because our tendency would be, as people who have all of our sense faculties, is that they would be missing something. There'd be like a kind of blackness or a void or a gap in their appreciation or perception of the world. I don't think that's necessarily the case. And when people who have never been able to see talk, it's not as if there's this big sort of missing area in their perceptual scheme, which is just like a black hole. I think we probably assume that blind people, just because when you close your eyes everything goes black, that's what their experience is, and I'm not sure that's necessarily the case at all. Their experience, their perception of everything is just as complete as ours, but with just with one sense faculty that's not there.
Don't their other senses?
So they say. Yeah.
I can't think of the phrase, but their other senses are sharper.
They move in to sort of fill the role of the missing sense, don't they? They do become sharper and more developed. Yeah.
Sense of touch, especially.
Yes.
Reading Braille.
Yes, precisely. Yeah.
What did you say, Alan?
The sense of touch for things like reading Braille.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of the some of the talks or some of the areas of interest on the Nature of Mind project, really.
So Trish was talking about the Nature of Mind project and some of the talks on that, which I haven't been involved with. Can you give a specific example, Trish?
Well, I don't recall hearing exactly this, but it's sort of, I think the first thing I listened to was a very highly ethicist, I think,
Mm.
and a Buddhist, and just finding a lot of common ground.
Mm. Yeah.
Mm.
So the point being, you might be thinking this is all very interesting and kind of like brain sort of stupefying, but I think the point that I'm trying to make, maybe to some degree of success, is that if anything, it's an approach that we can take to sort of undermining or challenging that idea of in here and out there, a world of objects that have separate, fixed, inherent qualities. And what I'm trying to move us towards is something which is much more kind of relational, yeah, where these sense spaces, these things condition each other, yeah. So rather than you know, being a kind of communication bridge between fixed objective realities out there and another fixed objective subjective reality in here. At which point it might be quite good to have a break